Bloomberg, author of Bloomberg by Bloomberg. Let's begin where you begin. One of the first chapters, The Last Supper, the thrill of getting fired. Explain.
Well, I got thrown out of Salomon Brothers when we sold the company. Technically, I was just not asked to join the new company. And while that hurt my ego, we were selling the old company, and so I got a lot of money at the same time. And it gave me the opportunity to start a new company.
What were you thinking at the time?
I think deep down inside that I was hurt that they didn't want me. Nobody likes to be rejected. But that maybe deep down inside I was going to show them. You know, revenge is sweet, somebody said, and you go out and you say, well, I'm going to build something big and show them they made a mistake. And I'm not sure I technically said that. Maybe I wasn't willing to let myself think I was thinking that, but I think deep down inside that's probably what was there.
Did you get what's often referred to as a golden parachute?
Actually, I got no severance whatsoever, but we were selling the company and I was a partner, so I owned a piece of the company. And so I got my money out at that time. I got my share of what the company was sold for, which is slightly different than a severance, but because technically I wasn't fired, I just wasn't asked to join the new company.
And you got $10 million?
That's what the book says.
What did you do with it?
Paid my taxes, number one, first thing you got to do. Went and put some of it into a bank account and started the current company. Didn't put anywhere near enough in, and went through that amount of money maybe in 6 months, and then every month for the next couple of years wrote another check out of my personal account into the company's account because I had to pay the payroll and pay the rent and those kinds of things.
Quote from the book, after you were fired or let go from Salomon, I didn't sit around wondering what was happening at the old firm. I didn't go back and visit. I never look over my shoulder. Once finished, gone, life continues.
Yes, you can't sit there and should have, would have, and could have is not a particularly useful thing to spend your time doing. It will just leave you heartsick, or it will leave you living a past life and not looking towards what could be great tomorrow.
Where'd you grow up?
Grew up in the suburbs of Boston, Medford, Massachusetts, which is a blue-collar town. Suburbs, woods behind the house. Funny thing is, when I go back now and visit my mother, who still lives in the house I grew up in, it's amazing how small the house is. I remembered it as a kid much bigger. But a nice family, and there was nothing dysfunctional in our family. I said in the book, if I screw it up, you can't blame my parents.
What did your parents do?
Father was a bookkeeper for a dairy company in the suburbs of Boston. He worked 6 or 7 days a week, every single day. There they are. And mother was a housewife until my father died, and then she went out and got a job and was the breadwinner.
When was this picture taken?
I think I was 12 years old at the time, the bottom one. It was when I became an Eagle Scout. The top two, long time before that.
What were you doing? Is this a Cub Scout photograph?
Must have been a Cub Scout photograph at Boy Scout camp, Cub Scout camp or something or other, chopping up a tree, making something or other. Those were good days.
Who were your heroes growing up, besides your parents?
Well, I remember there's a book, Johnny Tremaine, which was a book about a kid in Revolutionary War times in Boston, and he was a runner for Paul Revere, the silversmith, and helped smuggle information through British lines. And I think I pictured myself as Johnny Tremaine. And I certainly went to all the Revolutionary War sites in Boston and that area. That was a time when America and being proud of being an American was very popular. Sad that kids today don't realize their history as much as their heritage, whether their parents were born here or not. That is our heritage. But I remember Johnny Tremaine as being my hero, and maybe Warren Spahn, who was a pitcher for the Boston Braves. People don't remember that the Atlanta Braves came from Boston many years ago.
What was your high school like?
High school was big. I had 600-odd kids in my class. Almost none went to college. Very small percentage went to college. There was a vocational school next door, but it was basically, in those days, people went to high school. That was their formal education, their vocational training, and they went out in the workplace. And I remember it being pretty boring, actually, except for my senior year. They had a couple of programs that were interesting, and I remember both the teachers. Can't remember their names, but I can picture them, and I remember what they talked about, and they made, for the first time in my life, learning exciting.
If we were to talk to some of your classmates in high school and mention the name Mike Bloomberg, what would they say about you?
I don't know that anybody would remember each other. I don't remember us ever. The friends that I had, I never saw after high school. It's very sad. I was at a party at Labor Day weekend this past summer, and this woman came up, introduced herself to me. She was in my high school graduating class, and name doesn't ring a bell at all. And I've looked back in my high school yearbook, and I don't know whatever happened to all those people. They probably don't know what happened to me. But I did do a show at the PBS station in Boston about 3 or 4 months ago, and one of the interns there introduced himself. He is the son of my high school girlfriend. And I kept saying, how's your mother, and that sort of thing. But that's as close as I can come to any connection to the people in high school.
What about your extended family, brothers, sisters, or relatives?
I have a sister, lives in Atlanta. Her husband works for CNN. She's a specialist in geriatrics. She's got 3 kids. One just graduated from college. One's in college. One's applying to college. Nothing wrong with that part of the family either.
You spent a lot of time throughout the book talking about work. You mentioned on page 30, the more you work, the better you do. It's that simple. I always outworked the other guy. Later in the book, you talk about arriving at work at 6:30, 7 in the morning, and working till 7 or 8 at night. Why is that important to you? And what does that tell other people?
The only thing that you can control that influences success in life is how hard you work, how honest you are, and how well you deal with others. You can control those variables. You can't control how lucky you are, although the more you work, the luckier you get. You have no influence on the intellectual capabilities that God did or did not give you, but you can work as hard as possible. You can be scrupulously honest so that people respect you, and you can get along with others because nobody does anything by themselves.
Did you have to pay a price, though? You personally?
Well, I think that everything is an either-or. There is a price in everything. You can study or you can go out and play. You can defer to others or you can try to hog the credit. You can be honest and suffer the consequences, or you can lie, cheat, and steal, and short-term, maybe even advance. But long-term, you are better off if you work harder, you are better off if you're honest, and you are better off if you give others credit and get them to help you by helping them.
What do you tell others who try to strike that balance between family and work and volunteer efforts and anything else?
The answer of either-or is invariably yes. You can't go all in one direction. You cannot walk away from your family for your career. On the other hand, if you walk away from your career for your family, you're not going to have the money to support the family. And parents all the time are making those kinds of choices between career and family. They do some of both, and you try to blend the two, and that may not be the perfect answer, but that's a practical answer that I've always told young people when they go off to college. You have to study and you have to get good grades, but you certainly should have a good time as well, because that's part of your growing up experience, and there's no point in leading life to suffer all the time. You want to enjoy life as well as the next person. So it's some balance, some blend between the two.
And in fact, you talk about education. You went to Harvard Business School.
Yes.
But you also say that street smarts and common sense is a better indicator of success than any Ivy League education.
Well, I don't know that it's better than any Ivy League education. I think that street smarts and common sense are very important, and that while you should get good grades, there are lots of people who get straight A's who aren't very successful. Likewise, however, there are a lot of people with a lot of street smarts who aren't very successful because they didn't get any decent grades. So once again, a balance. It's not just book learning. Memorizing facts in school may get you through the test and get you a great grade, but understanding the context that those facts are in is what the real purpose of education is, or learning how to study so that later on, when you have to get a set of facts to earn a living or to raise your family, you can go out and do that. It's those skills that are important.
What is Bloomberg News?
Bloomberg News is 700 print journalists and 200 radio and television journalists that try to cover the world for serious upscale news with a heavy emphasis on business and finance and the securities industries.
How did you create it?
one day decided that we needed to be in the news business, although the guy that I picked to come in and start the news operation for us, Matt Winkler, and who helped me with this book, without Matt, I never would have gotten it done. He kept urging me to keep going and kept bugging me, and every time I had a question, he was there with an answer, and I said it was written with invaluable help by Matt Winkler, and that's true. Without him, it never would have gotten done. But Matt always argued that we were in the news business long before he joined us. The difference was we initially had news in tabular form and graphical form, numbers and lines on paper and on computer screens, and the news that we started with Matt was textual news to explain or enhance or display another format. But we've always been in the news business. So in one sense, we've been in the news business since 1981. We started the company. In another sense, we've been in the print news business through a newswire on our terminals, and we give it to newspapers and other organizations. For about 8 years, we've had a New York City all-news radio station for about 5, and we've been doing television for 3.
I want to come back to that, but let's move even further back, mid-1960s. Who was William Solomon?
Bill Solomon was the managing partner of Solomon Brothers, a descendant of the original Solomon Brothers that started the firm. Bill was, still is, although he's retired now, a class act human being who had some beliefs that I hope I've learned and copied. He believed in hard work, he believed in honesty, and Bill believed in a management style where everybody knew where they stood, and it was a meritocracy. If you were better than the other person or worked harder than the other person, you would get ahead, and there was nothing else that mattered. We were not a firm where your lineage counted at all. We were a firm where what you did was the measure, and I always wanted that kind of an environment because I could control it.
Quote from the book, "What mattered on Wall Street in those years was not the individual, but the organization."
We worked together at Solomon Brothers, and at Bloomberg now, people work together. At Solomon then and at Bloomberg now in slightly different forms, but the same ideas. The compensation systems are firm-wide and long-term, so that there's never one department against another. If you and I are working together and you manage to do something well, if you're a salesman, sell the product. If you're a writer, write a good story. If you're the receptionist, quiet down a customer or a disgruntled customer and get them to the right person. I'm sitting next to you. I'm going to get a smile on my face the better job you do, because my compensation system is tied to the overall firm performance, and you, by doing a good job, are helping the overall firm. If it's compensation systems set you against me, then the organization doesn't work well together. And particularly in an organization like ours where the product is complex, and there are many reasons why people are subscribers or renters or leasers or buyers, whatever the case may be. Getting people to work together is the difference between success and failure.
Was that your first job out of college?
I went from Johns Hopkins, where I was an engineer, to Harvard Business School, to Solomon Brothers, and they threw me out 15 years later, started this. So I can't keep a job, but only have 2 so far.
So we'll move back up to 1981. You're let go from the company. What was the process that finally led to Bloomberg News? And what was the timeline as well?
Well, I knew, as I described in the book, about 2 months before the end of our fiscal year, when we were going to close on this deal of selling the company, that I was not going to be invited to join the new firm. They had told me that, and I wasn't surprised. It was really time for me to go, in all fairness. That firm was changing in ways that I didn't agree with, and I wasn't necessarily right, and it wasn't one of these right or wrong answer things. I just thought we should be going in one direction. The firm was starting to change in another direction. I was very vocal about it, and they didn't want me there, and that was okay. So I knew I was going to leave. I had a couple months to think about it, and I started to evaluate what my options were. How much capital did I have? What skills did I have? Who did I know? What was my temperament like? Where did I want to live? How hard did I want to work? And then, given those things, looked around for something that I could do. And since nobody offered me a job, although in all fairness I didn't look for one either, I decided I wanted to start my own business, and that the strengths and resources I had led me to software, which is not capital intensive, dealing with Wall Street, which is where I had knowledge and contacts, and running a small company where I thought I had some skills. I knew a little bit about technology, a little bit about computers, a little bit about management, a little bit about people, and a lot about hard work, and those were the things that were required.
10 years before, 1972, when you were initially not named a partner,
Yep.
did that experience teach you anything?
I remember it hurt. We had every year the firm took in new partners, and there was one year when I and a whole group of other people, all the same ages, were all really cinches to become partners, particularly me. At least that's what everybody said, and I guess deep down inside I believed it. And out comes this list one day with this enormous number of people on it. They made more partners that year than ever before, and probably ever since, and there was one name was missing, and it was mine. And I've never asked Bill Solomon why, and I think if I asked him I would never get an answer. But I remember being very badly hurt. I remember I was going to, just my instincts were I'm going to show them, and I called somebody who had a big block of stock, and somehow or other I put together one of the biggest trades the firm had ever done at that time, wrote out the order slips so that it was a done deal for the firm, handed it over to one of the traders, and just got up and I left. I said, I'm going for the rest of the day, because I don't think I could have sat there as everybody was congratulating each other, and they would have been very awkward for them to have to walk around me. And I left, and I went home, and I did what I've always done when I've been upset or worried or perplexed. I put on my running stuff and went out and ran by myself and talked about it. Walked in the next day, didn't say anything to anybody. Nobody said anything to me. And 3 months later, out of the blue, don't know why, once again, I wouldn't get a good answer from Billy if I asked him, they had another partners meeting and took myself and another guy into the partnership.
But you didn't quit.
I didn't quit, thank goodness. You know, I think it's my advice to young people is you never want to do something on the spur of the moment. You don't want to jump too quickly. That doesn't mean you should sit around and waste your whole life and never realize when something's not going to happen or when the opportunity's not going to be presented. But every time I thought about leaving Solomon, I stopped and said, well, you know, I'm learning a lot. And even though I might have been able to make more money elsewhere, it was a great firm. They were scrupulously honest, phenomenally competent, worked very hard, very nice to me. I always decided to stay. I don't think I ever seriously, other than maybe a little Walter Mitty dream now and then, I don't think I ever seriously ever thought of leaving. And it turned out to be great. I can say nothing but good things about them, even when them firing me was the right thing.
30 or 31 years after you first came to Wall Street, how has it changed?
The fundamental difference, and it's a difference in the world as well, is who controls the information has changed. And since information is so important, the monies and power go with information control. When I started in Wall Street in 1966, it was the sell side, the brokerage firms and the dealers in the bond business who had all the information. They knew the terms of the securities, they knew the supply, they knew the demand, they had the expertise, all the smart people worked for them, whatever was automated, the little computers they had. The difference between then and now is that everybody has the same information, partially because of systems like ours and other people's, partially just because there's this enormous explosion of bandwidth in this world where everybody can get at information a lot easier. And if you look, you can see that before, if you wanted to make a lot of money, you went to work on the sell side. Today, you could just as easily go to work on the buy side, and there are plenty of people on the buy side that make as much money as those people on the sell side. In the olden days, the bank would call and say, we have some money, what do we do with it? Today, the bank calls and says, we want offerings in the following investments, and we may or may not get back to you.
How does a Bloomberg terminal work?
Bloomberg Terminal is fundamentally a packaged device of software, and you can put it on your hardware or our hardware, but it's connected via phone lines, could be by the internet or by an intranet or any of those, any kind of phone line, could be cellular actually, where what we try to do is we take publicly available information, nothing's proprietary. If we had insider information, we go to jail. It's all out there. But what we do is we scrub it. No information database is very clean. There's lots of bad garbage in there because people make mistakes. You got to get out, and without that, it's not useful. We categorize it because you got to know the difference between this kind of information and that kind of information. Think of round pegs versus square pegs. We have the right kind of databases to store it. Some databases hold round, some databases hold square, and when an oval-shaped rod comes along, you've got to have a different database to hold those. Otherwise, if you jam it in the square or the round hole, you really screw things up. And then we give you a search engine, if you will, to go and find it, because the more information there is in the world, the better off you are in that what you want exists. But the more difficult the job is to find what you want, because there's a much bigger pile. And then lastly, what we do is, at the touch of a button, we give you some programs to go and do something with the data. Graph it, chart it, regress it, compare it, project it. But we do that automatically for you, so you don't have to go and write your own software. You don't have to be a mathematician to use our data. You do whatever you do well, and we just give it to you in the form you need it.
Who are your clients?
Clients are banks, brokerage firms, insurance companies, securities dealers around the world. Clients are the financial side and the investor relations side of corporate America. Clients are central banks. We're basically the communication system for most of the central banks in the world. Government organizations around the world. Here in Washington, I think the World Bank was one of our first few clients. Anybody that really needs information at a professional level. We have television, radio, magazines, website for the man on the street. And that stuff, the price is basically for free. You get your money out of advertising. But the terminals that we sell, or lease actually, those are for professionals, and those sell for roughly $1,200 a month. And I think most of our customers, while they obviously like to get it in less expensively, would tell you it's well worth it.
Another quote from the book. You say that if you're going to succeed, you need a vision, one that's affordable, practical, and fills the customer's needs. You then go on to say, then go for it. Don't worry too much about the details. Don't second guess your creativity. Does that happen a lot with entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think a lot of people get tied up in writing business plans, in being very dogmatic. A lot of people waste their time planning for what if. I gave an example in the book of a competitor who I listened to a presentation from their CEO, and he showed pictures of their shipping department with white-coated technicians and packaging equipment and conveyor belts and all that sort of stuff. And it was all great, except they never built quantity one. I think a lot of people tend to do that. Don't worry about how you're going to account for making 1,000 a day. You got to build one, and then you got to build one every other day, and then one every day, and then whatever.
Your competitors, Dow Jones and Reuters?
I've heard of those companies. What do they do?
Why didn't they do what you do? Why didn't they think of it?
Competing against successful big companies is relatively easy. Successful big companies have two characteristics that make them particularly vulnerable. One, big companies have bureaucracies that protect the top management, and information flow about changes in the marketplace never get to the top. And two, successful ones, even if information about a new competitor gets to the top, because they're successful, they never want to change the formula. They argue that they're doing pretty well, otherwise they wouldn't make a lot of money. So we went into an industry with these two giants, and lo and behold, there's our people. We went in and started to do something slightly different. They didn't pay attention, and one day it was easier for us to add to our product what they had than for them to add to their product what we have. And I think that's probably still true today.
Do you remember the first time you ever operated a computer?
In college, we had a computer course. I spent my Christmas vacation writing a program, and you had these punch cards in those days. I was terrible at it. You had to be absolutely perfectly accurate, and I was much too careless. It took me forever to do it.
What does your mom think of what you've done with your life? What does she think?
When I talk to her, I think her basic attitude is don't let it go to your head. The only times I know she really notices, every once in a while somebody will write a great glowing article that I think is just a dream for somebody, for the subject, and she'll say, oh, she saw that, you know, oh, I wish he hadn't said this little thing. I said, Mother, nobody's going to give you a perfect article.
I had read somewhere, and it was also, I think, in the book, that you don't go to a farewell party for one of your employees. Is that true?
Not. That is true.
Why?
I have a responsibility to the people that work for our company. They have every right to expect me to devote 100% of my attention, at least the part that's not devoted to my family, but my business part, to protecting them and to helping them. And if you leave our company, then you're not part of that group. And particularly if you leave our company to go to work for, let's say, a competitor. Why anybody would wish somebody well who left the company that they work for when that person was going to a competitor, I, for the life of me, do not understand. If you think about it, if somebody leaves C-SPAN and goes to work for a competitor or C-SPAN, they're trying to make the competitor better, C-SPAN worse. They're hurting you and your family. And your loyalties should be to the other people at C-SPAN, just as my loyalties should be to the other people at Bloomberg. If I want those people to work hard and to help build our company, then the loyalty that I hope they give us is going to be earned by me having a loyalty to them. And we have some policies. If you leave our company, you cannot come back. I don't think it's fair to the people who stayed through the tough times. If somebody goes, tries to have a better life, doesn't work out, and comes back, what about the people who were here all the time? It isn't that I'm trying to hurt those who leave. I'm trying to protect those that stay. And I think the fact that we have very low turnover says that fundamentally that's very appreciated.
What's important to Michael Bloomberg?
I think, number one, my family. I've got 2 teenage daughters I'm very proud of. Number 2, my reputation. I would like that people not only think that I'm a good father, but my honesty and philanthropic interests are the things that I'm the most proud of. Or being a good manager. It's very heady stuff to have built a company where you have 4,000 people and there's families involved with every one of them. So, you know, God knows how many people are really dependent on my business judgment being right. That's a very heady thing. Recognition and fame is not so bad. You should try it. You have it. And when you walk down the street and people say, in your case, hey, I saw your show, it was great. Well, in my case, they stop you and say, hey, my niece or nephew works for your company, and I just want you to know they think it's the most wonderful place in the world to work. Or we're a customer of Bloomberg, and I want you to know we can't do our business without you. Those things really are give you a lot of pleasure.
Advice on money. Don't worry about taxes. Don't spoil your children. And buy yourself enormous pleasure. Give to charity.
Absolutely.
Explain.
Number one, more people do more stupid things to avoid taxes than anything else that any other determinant, any other thing that they look at. And that's not just true in inheritance. Day in and day out, April 15th should be a pleasant day for everybody. Boy, I hope next year that my tax bill on April 15th is bigger than my tax bill last April 15th. Can't understand people that don't want to pay more taxes. Says you're making more. Don't worry about the taxes. Do what's right and let Uncle Sam or the state or city governments get whatever they have to get. That's the way we have these services we all want and need, and you shouldn't begrudge anybody. Second is, I think if you're very wealthy, the great danger is to give your kids too much. If you just read the papers of these families that are torn apart by siblings fighting with each other, or siblings or children of wealthy people who got so much money they lost the desire to work hard. They started thinking of themselves as better than others and lost all their friends that don't contribute to society. You really you can hurt your kids if you got a lot of money much easier than, much more than you can help them. And lastly, I can't think of what else you can do with your money if you're reasonably wealthy that would give you as much pleasure as philanthropic kinds of things. You can make a better life for people if you want to give to museums. You can educate the next generation of kids, the next generation of people who your family, your descendants are going to have to depend on, so it's a very selfish thing. You can give some money to try to cure diseases or prevent diseases. There's lots of things that you can do, and all of them are more satisfying than having another steak, in all fairness.
What's next?
Don't know. I'm looking forward to going to work on Monday. I look forward every day to doing that. I think we'll do some more television. We do more different language products around the world. We have 11 different television networks in 8 different languages. We have translated our system into a dozen languages, and we're trying to do more in the domestic market. Maybe some public service kinds of things. I spend a day a week in Baltimore, Maryland at Johns Hopkins University, which is my second job and great love, and would like to do more of that, and I can see with time doing more of that and a little less of the commercial side. We have a great company with lots of good managers, and one of the things that I can really do for them is to slowly withdraw myself a little bit to create more opportunity for them. You've got to give them a chance to move up and get more responsibility, or they're going to either leave or they're just going to go to sleep, and neither of those things are good for our company.
The book is called Bloomberg by Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.